How can you attract this beautiful bird to your backyard? Find out next on Twits and Pishers. Hello birders. Well, we're back in Canada today, and I've just been walking through these spruce woods, hearing mountain chickadees, black-capped chickadees, boreal chickadees, pine grosbeak, and just noticed this, great horned owl feather. Any guesses where we are? We're in the foothills of Alberta, near the town of Turner Valley, and today we're going to focus on winter bird feeding, a very popular activity for birders and bird watchers, much more popular than trudging around in the woods. It's quite cold out today. You know, for those of us, or those of you who were with those of us who were on the island of Maui last time, it's a bit of a shock, I have to tell you. But we are now at 191 species on our species list. We might even make it to the magic number of 200 today, so who knows? Stay tuned, find out. There's a black-capped chickadee with a solid black cap, very cute bird. And there's a mountain chickadee with a white line through the eye. The boreal chickadee has a brown head and a buff-colored body. And that's a male pine grosbeak, a pink, about robin-sized finch. Turner Valley lies in the foothills of Alberta, southwest of Calgary, and the winter birds here are also found throughout most of southern Canada. The reason I chose this location for our winter bird feeding show has to do with Tom Webb. Each morning he begins the day by offering culled chicks from a nearby hatchery to his resident great horned owls. It may seem like an odd way to feed birds, but at least this way the chicks don't go to waste and the owls have a better chance of making it through the winter. Incredible. The great horned owl is one of the most powerful predatory birds in North America, and it's always a thrill to see one in motion. Tom Webb is retired now, but he keeps himself busy building some of the finest bird feeders I've ever seen. His designs owe a lot to his experience with birds as well as his woodworking expertise, and all of his models have been field tested in his own backyard. He sells them in birdwatching stores around Alberta. Now let's have a look at who's who in the feeder crowd at Tom's place. On the ground, eating sunflower seeds, there are always some pine grosbeaks. The adult males are flushed with bright pink, and besides being eye-catching, they are also quite tame and easy to get a good look at. The females are less colorful with a yellowish head, but they still have a very pleasing overall look to them. That's probably a young male in behind with a darker head than the adult female. The evening grosbeak has an even larger beak, and the male is unmistakable in his yellow, brown, and white plumage. The female at the rear there is more of a gray bird, but they both love sunflower seeds. The name grosbeak, by the way, comes from the French term for big beak. Grosbeaks are part of the group we call winter finches since they swarm southward each year from their northern breeding grounds, some years more so than others. That's a gray jay, a bird with many unofficial names such as whiskey jack, camp robber, and Canada jay. If you're wondering, the Latin name is Parasaurus canadensis, which means the Canadian heaper-upper. Tom feeds them dry cat food, which they cache, heap it up in other words, in nooks and crevices so they have some handy for snacks in case Tom forgets to fill the feeders. The familiar blue jay can look gray from below, but that crested head and the dark face pattern are easy means to tell the two apart. Those little streaky birds in behind are pine siskins, another sort of winter finch. They're related to goldfinches and they have a bit of yellow color in their wing feathers. They used to have the best scientific name of all, Spinus pinus, but it has now been changed to Carduelis pinus to indicate that they are related to redpolls. At the suet feeder, that's a male downy woodpecker, the smallest woodpecker in North America. Only the male has that bright red patch on the top of the head. Notice how 2 toes face forward and 2 back, unlike the usual 3 forward, 1 back arrangement in most other birds. And there's a brown creeper, a shy little bark-clinging bird. In winter, birds appreciate liquid water as much as they do food, and this homemade drinking trough gets a continual stream of visitors. Of course, all 3 species of chickadees eat sunflower seeds, suet, and the peanut butter that Tom places in his window feeder. In the course of attracting all these species to his yard, Tom has also had some expert bird feeding advice from a mutual friend of ours. Myrna Pearman is the author of Winter Bird Feeding, an Alberta Guide, and she's our winter bird feeding expert for today's show. You know, you'd think it would be an easy thing. You get yourself a bird feeder, some bird feed, and birds come and feed on it. But it's not. Myrna, how do we sort through all this confusion?
Well, it's not really that confusing, I guess, but we should just remember that bird food is separated into 2 groups, seeds and suet. We put out seeds for the seed-eating birds and suet for the insect-eating birds. So in the seed department, number 1 is sunflower seeds. And there's some discussion about the merits of the 2 main types of sunflower seeds, the small block oil and the large striped. Now, a lot of people, especially in southern Alberta, find that the birds around here eat only the large striped and ignore the black oil. When I was researching my book, I interviewed people in the Edmonton area who told me the exact opposite.
That's what I find, yeah.
So I say put out both kinds in your backyard, and whatever your birds like, go for. Almost any bird that will come to a bird feeding station in the winter will eat sunflower seeds. So everything from chickadees to woodpeckers to blue jays, siskins, redpolls, grosbeaks.
What are these little black seeds here?
Okay, the number 2 food, if you can afford it, is Niger seed. And this is a thistle seed. It's a thistle that's grown in Ethiopia and India. It's extremely expensive, and it's a favorite of the finches. So redpolls and siskins in the summer, American goldfinches just go crazy over this. They absolutely love it.
How much does it cost compared to the other seeds?
It's about, the last I checked, I think it's about $5 a pound.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so it's really expensive. So the number 3 food is canola. And this again is a favorite of the finches, especially the winter finches. Redpolls just love canola. And so you can put it out in a tray feeder or in a feeder similar to the Niger seed feeders. Number 5?
Peanut.
Yes, peanuts. Any kind of nuts. If you're, you just won the lottery, put out pistachios. But if you're just an ordinary bird feeder operator, peanuts are usually what people put out. And you can put them out shelled or unshelled.
Is this mainly for the blue jays and magpies?
Shelled peanuts will be eaten by many species. Little chickadees love shelled peanuts, and they love walnuts as well.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But blue jays really love peanuts. The number 5 food is corn. So corn is not really a preferred seed, but blue jays do like it. House sparrows
corn,
like it.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Cracked corn. You can put out whole corn as well. The grouse also like corn.
Oh,
so
right.
Corn put on the ground will be eaten by grouse. Chickadees will pick at it, but it's not a real favorite. Then moving on down the line, we have millet. And millet is really only a preferred food of the migrating sparrows. And so the native sparrows in spring and fall will love to come in and eat millet. And a great place to put millet is right under the little bowl areas of spruce trees or on the ground.
Right on the ground.
Pretty much anywhere. Yeah. And they love to come in and feed. They'll feed on the millet, and they'll also feed on the sunflower seeds.
What about the mixed seed in the corner here?
Very bottom of the heap. And I recommend, if you're going to buy bird seed, do not buy this. Do not buy the mixed bird seed, because it contains the seeds that are just simply not preferred. In fact, some of the seeds are not eaten at all. Grain sorghum or the red milo is really not a preferred seed at all. And so basically it's a filler material that ends up on your lawn. So you're paying for material that's not even eaten. So the most cost effective is to put out sunflower seeds. And I recommend not mixing any of these seeds. So don't even bother with mixes. Put sunflower seeds out in sunflower seed feeders, Niger seed and Niger seed feeders, and on down the line.
So you mentioned the tube feeder and just putting feed on the ground. What about the more normal sorts of bird feeders?
Right. The most common option is to use a tray feeder. And tray feeders are great for the flock species like redpolls that like to come in and all feed together. The problem with the tray feeder, of course, is if it snows, all the seeds get covered up with snow. If it rains, then these seeds get pretty soggy, and soggy sunflower seeds aren't really that healthy for the birds. So if you're going to use a tray feeder, it's a good idea to have at least a little lid on the top or a roof over it.
Do the soggy seeds get mold on them or fungus or something like that?
They do get a mold.
Oh, a mold.
That is apparently harmful to the birds. So it's best to keep the seeds dry if at all possible. An option if you're going to use a tray feeder is to use one that has mesh or screen on the bottom. And this well-used one is the one that I use. And so if it does happen to rain, then the seeds will dry out fairly quickly. So the other type of feeder is the tube feeder. Now the advantage of tube feeders is that, of course, the birds feed one at a time, so they're not scattering seeds all over the place. They actually have to reach in and extract a seed, and so there's going to be a lot less wastage. The seeds are covered, protected from the elements, and you can see when the trays or the feeder's going to go empty.
At the top here, is that
just pour it in from the top. Yeah. So this is good for sunflower seeds or for canola.
And you can take this whole thing apart and clean it, can't you?
You can take the perches off. Yeah, and it's fairly easy to wash.
Yeah.
In most cases, you shouldn't really need to have to clean it because, as I say, the birds don't get into the seeds at all.
Oh, right. It's quite difficult to mess it up. Yeah.
Now, the other very popular style of feeder is the hopper feeder. I recommend a decent-sized hopper feeder because you don't want to have to go out and fill it every day. Mm-hmm. And the birds are going to be more likely to come into your yard and stay in your yard if they know that the food's not going to run out before noon every day. So if the food's there consistently, they're more likely to hang around.
What about feeders for kids to build? It's kind of, I mean, this is more advanced woodwork than even I could handle.
Yeah, feeders can be made from household things that you normally would just throw out, like antifreeze jugs or bleach bottles, pop bottles, and actually ice cream pails make ideal seed feeders.
There you go. This is a nice little solarium they have here, isn't it?
Great way to watch birds. Don't have to be out in the cold. Just sit in the warm, by the warm fire and enjoy them.
These pine grosbeaks, they don't seem to be at all upset with each other when they're on the ground with the sunflower seeds. But as soon as they get on that water heater, they seem to become a little bit more belligerent.
I think basically when birds are in a position where they feel that the resource that they're trying to get at is in short supply, they'll get fairly aggressive. And so if they get confined in a small space, or if they want to be first at the bird water, as you see, then they will try and push the subordinate birds out of the way. So that there's a hierarchy that's established, a pecking order. And the dominant birds are the ones that, as you can see there, will push off the subordinate ones.
So that beautiful red male, even though he's so gorgeous, he's not a dominant bird, is he?
No, he had to move. And it's interesting to see how they do that. The dominant bird will reach across and open up its beak in an aggressive posture to tell the subordinate to shove over. Or they'll often drop their wings and lift their tail. And again, that's an aggressive gesture.
It looks aggressive. I mean, it's really easy to interpret it.
Yeah, fairly intimidating.
They look. If I was not a bird, I'd move over. I'd make room.
And it works.
Yeah. Oh, is that a mountain chickadee? Or no, it's not. Sorry, it's black-capped. Yeah.
My favorite bird.
Is that your favorite bird?
Black-capped chickadees.
That's great. You know what? I am just always amazed by the fact that something that small with a high body temperature and a high metabolic rate can make it through one of these winters. How do they do it?
It is.
Man.
They have very high metabolisms. They have to eat a lot during the day, obviously. And it always amazed me, how could they survive the night?
Well, that's
when
sure,
it's
because
that
they're not
cold.
feeding. Yeah, they're just sleeping.
I just happened to bring along with me part of a woodpecker cavity.
Oh, look at
And
that.
I was fascinated to learn that this is where little chickadees spend the night. That-
Well, sure, yeah, not just out on an empty or an open branch someplace, yeah.
Right. That a little flock of them will when it gets dark at dusk, go in and all huddle together. And apparently, they will all huddle together trying to keep warm. And then on a really cold night, the temperature of the cavity obviously drops as they sleep. And when it gets down to a critical level, they all start to shiver. That generates heat. Temperature goes up to a level where it's comfortable. They all fall asleep. Temperature drops. They all start to shiver. Temperature goes up. And apparently that's how they make it through the night.
No kidding.
So if you have a little chickadee that comes to your feeder first thing in the morning and its tail's crooked, you know that it got the outside of the bed for the night.
This is my favorite bird feeder. My sister-in-law made it for me. And you know, when birds come to John's Diner, they're free to behave like birds. A lot of people think that they can teach birds good table manners at their feeder. It's simply not the case. After all, they are birds, not people. I also welcome all species of birds to my feeders, even house sparrows. I find house sparrows interesting even though they're an introduced bird that many people really dislike. And I think, too, that having a lot of activity around your feeder, even if it's just house sparrows, will attract other species of birds. I've had things like tree sparrows, even Harris's sparrows in my yard, and that's the benefit that you get from, putting up with the house sparrows. So, you know what they say, don't be cheap with your seed. Another one of Tom Webb's hobbies is home video making, and he has accumulated hours and hours of close-up footage of the birds that visit his yard. It takes a great deal of patience to do this sort of thing, but with the quality of many modern home video cameras, the results can be quite good and well worth the effort. Tom and I use the same model for our home videos, and we both find the Hi8 system to be excellent for bird videography. The birds don't seem to mind Tom and his camera, and when he was finished taping the grosbeaks and being taped himself, I asked him about the highlights of his winter bird feeding experience. So how long have you been feeding the birds here, Tom?
Well, we moved into our house in November of '74 and started feeding then. And for the first winter, we had trouble using 2.5 pounds of sunflower seeds. And now, 20 years later, we're up to the 1,200 pound mark.
1,200 pounds of sunflower seeds?
Yeah, we put the feeders out usually October and take them in again or in about April or May. And this is actually for our lawn furniture and umbrella and things out here. So, but it gets far more use in the wintertime than it does in the summertime.
Well, no kidding. How much suet do you go through?
About 200 pounds in the winter. That I can't remember what we first went through or even when I started putting it out, but it's up to about 200 pounds for the last 2 or 3 years.
That's one little chickadee mouthful at a time, huh?
Well,
that'd be an interesting calculation to make, wouldn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Well, you've got both the downy and the hairy woodpeckers here?
And sometimes the pileated. I've had the pileated here at the feeder also.
A lot of people have trouble telling those two woodpeckers apart, the downy and the hairy.
Well, the size is the main thing. The downy's quite a bit smaller and the hairy has quite a bit longer beak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy in a place like this where you can see them both, in the course of an hour's watching. It's a lot tougher when you just see one bird all on its own. What have been the most interesting birds that have, or the most unusual, I should say? I mean, they're all interesting.
They're all interesting. One of the most unusual was the first recorded overwintering of a brown thrasher.
Oh, is that right?
It showed up here, and I think it was '88, an extremely cold winter. There was lots of nights that were 40 below, and I tried 22 different kinds of food for that bird, everything mealworms, worms, maggots, fish bait, all kinds of seeds, cat food, dog food. And what it finally chose and lived on for the whole winter was pie pastry. My wife
No,
had,
okay.
yeah,
That's not a bad idea.
my wife had made some pastry tarts, and getting them out of the pan, they broke. So I just brought them out and threw them down there, and that's what the thrasher went for. We had a rufous-sided towie. Spent most of the winter. I don't know whether it perished or whether it survived.
That's an unusual bird for this part of the world.
I think so, yeah. But we've had tree sparrows and white-crowned sparrows, and actually quite a few that should not be here in the wintertime. But there seems to be more and more species that are taking a chance and spending the winter here.
I wanted to ask you about your hummingbirds too. Now I know that's not winter bird feeding, but it snows here any month of the year, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've had hummingbirds in the snow.
Yeah, we've had snow every month of the year, and our irrigation pipes froze up and burst one center of June.
I'm impressed too that you've got so many different kinds of owls around here.
Well, we've got everything from the pygmy owl to the great gray.
Yeah. You've had saw-whet owl here.
I've had
too, right?
pygmy,
Yeah.
I've had saw-whet, I've had barred.
There's not very many you're missing.
No, I think
Hawk owl maybe.
I think pretty near everything's here.
Oh, that's
It's
good.
kind of interesting to watch the interaction between all the different species and everything.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sometimes it seems the more food they have, the more they squabble over it. So, go ahead and have a drink.
Have a drink there, buddy. Oh boy, that's not a bad look at a rough-legged hawk, late phase. That's a bird that breeds up on the Arctic tundra and winters down further south. The foothills of Alberta are a great place for rough-legged hawk, and that is species number 198 on our list. We're just on the road back to Turner Valley, going out to Tom Webb's place for a second look at his feeders. It's unbelievable, 3 in 1 spot. Suet is the fat around the kidneys of beef and sheep, and although birds will eat raw suet, there are ways to make it even more appealing. Myrna Pearman melts ground suet in a pot on the stove and adds peanut butter, cornmeal, and things like wheatlets as well. That looks good. Bran works well here too, by the way. Mix it well, then add some dry cat food. And if you like eggshells, give it that extra bit of texture. When the whole mess is liberally applied to a hanging suet log, it's a treat no suet-eating bird dares to pass up. Well, there you have it, a grand total of 198 species since we started working on this television series. We saw some fine birds at Turner Valley, and I'm glad to finally add some typical Canadian winter species to our checklist. Well, that's about all the time we have for winter bird feeding. If you're not already feeding the birds yourself, I hope you'll give it a try. And remember too, there's a very important component of this whole bird feeding thing that has to do with your location. I mean, the Webbs couldn't be much luckier. They're right here out in the foothills along the valley of the Sheep River. If you're in the middle of a city, well, you won't get all of these wonderful, colorful birds. The basic principle is that you will attract the birds that are already passing through your area. It's just a matter of putting out the right food and the right sort of feeders. Too bad we didn't get to 200 species today, but we're so close, 198. We only need 2 more. Tune in next time. We only need to find those 2 birds, and we'll be on the biggest Christmas bird count in the world. Until then, happy bird watching. See you later. Just a reminder that our title contest is now officially closed. Stay tuned next week to vote on which of the top 5 suggestions you like best.